What's up? I'm Jared Harris, and you're listening to episode 31 of Beats by Jer. If you know me, or if you listen to enough of this podcast already, you probably have a good sense of what I tend to listen to on the regular. A lot of 90s rock, a lot of classic rock, some jazz, some hip-hop, some funk, and you would be 100% correct. My wife calls me a snob. I like what I like, and I really don't like what I don't like. But I really do make an effort to listen to as much music that comes my way. Between the countless recommendations I receive from PR agents daily for consideration and my friends and the Spotify algorithm, I am constantly seeking out new music, or rather, new music is constantly finding its way to me. But much of it is in the same vein as to what I'm already listening to. My friends, for the most part, are listening to things of interest, things that I listen to. Spotify literally is built to send you more music that it thinks you will like, so you'll keep listening to more music. Right? It's all kind of insular in that sense. For example, over the summer, my tattoo artist turned me on to the new Lupe Fiasco record, Samurai. Both a friend and the Spotify algorithm recently got me into the neo-soul meets jazz fusion of Hiatus Kaiyote. New artists, sure, new records. But this checks out. This tracks with what you've heard so far on Beats by Jer, and it's not really surprising anyone. So when things are making waves outside of my sphere of interest, I do make the effort to check it out. Pop music is ever-changing, and I like to see where things are at and where they're headed. There are things that I enjoy, but for the most part, it's not really my thing. That being said, I could see the appeal. I could see why pop music is pop music. It's popular and people love it, and I fully see that. However, every now and then, I get swept up in an artist or a record in a way that completely catches me off guard. It surprises me, it finds its way, and I'm drawn in, and I end up enjoying it significantly more than I expected to, and I enjoy it more than, it's just big, it's a surprise, and that's, I enjoy those moments a lot. So with that, I want to introduce my latest series, Left Field. In this series, I plan to explore artists, albums, styles, and movements that you wouldn't necessarily expect to hear about on Beats by Jer. Largely because I myself wouldn't expect to be talking about it on Beats by Jer. Maybe you walk out with a new recommendation, but at the very least, I hope we can all gain a little perspective on something we don't know much about. This perhaps is one of the greatest things about art after all. It can pull you in when you least expect it for the reasons unknown, taking you to new and fantastical destinations. For the inaugural episode, I want to look at what I believe will be the biggest pop album of 2024. People have been championing the lead single as the song in the summer since its release all the way back in April. And while it was only released last week, the album that is, I believe the staying power of the singles has demonstrated a greater level of relevance amid the zeitgeist than other new releases from the likes of Ariana Grande, Olivia Rodrigo, Dua Lipa, Billie Eilish, and even Taylor Swift, whose massive double record, the Tortured Poets Department, has held the number one spot on the Billboard 200 for 15 weeks, a record that, despite its chart performance, seemed to come and go within a week or two of its release, and I'm convinced most non-Swifties could not name a single song from it. The Tortured Poets Department remains a massive, if not curious, feat. But of course, this is in no way any slight to any of these artists, each of whom have released massive records this year, and that have each occupied a great level of the mainstream consciousness, and nearly all of them are in the midst of massive arena tours. This, of course, is just a testament to the excitement surrounding this artist. Before we get into who that is, also curiously, scrolling through the top 40, Billboard's top 40, pop music this year is absolutely dominated by women, whereas nearly all the male artists are nearly all country with the occasional rapper and the occasional legacy classic rocker. Fleetwood Mac continues their massive 594-week run with Rumors at the 32 spot, for example. But I digress. Just some interesting things that I noticed when doing some research. The artist we'll be looking at today appears to carry the cultural momentum to outshine her contemporaries. Today we'll be looking at Sabrina Carpenter's Short and Sweet. Released on August 23rd, Short and Sweet was seemingly inescapable from the first single, Espresso, which dropped on April 11th of this year. This is my introduction to Carpenter. Espresso was everywhere. It's catchy, it's funky, it grooves, it's a great song. So great that it actually left me curious, kind of like a little bookmark. Check out this record when the whole thing drops. The following single, Please, 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 released on June 6, proved to be just as exciting, with a dense arrangement and a unique structure. Critics and fans alike have been divided on which single should actually be the song of the summer. Personally, I'd say Espresso for the vibes, but Please, Please, Please may be the more interesting song from a songwriting perspective. At first, I was drawn in by the songwriting and performance. Both songs sound as though they were recorded with a band, something which should never be taken for granted in pop music. But beyond that, the arrangements, the tasteful use of lead lines that organically grow and are strategically placed was masterful. The production was exceptional. Carpenter has a stunning voice, which of course is baseline for pop, I suppose, but with the arrangements and her lyrics, something that shines bright across the entire record. These are the things that pulled me in through the singles and led me to check out the album upon its release. Thematically, the album looks at love and loss, something which on the surface sounds very typical for pop music, but through using her own relationships as a microcosm, Carpenter seems to have made these narratives feel as personal as they are universal. To a greater effect, Short and Sweet serves as a 12-song collection that criticizes the culture of dating and relationships in the 2020s. In fact, there are times that there is a level of longing for the norms of previous generations, which juxtaposes with a level of sexual liberation of modern-day casual dating. It's a unique outlook that works through Carpenter's lyrical approach that is biting, clever, witty, and often humorous. Short and Sweet is Carpenter's sixth album and follows 2022's Emails I Can't Send, both of which were released via Island Records. Curiously, after her breakthrough role on Disney's Girl Meets World, Carpenter had released 4 albums between 2015 and 2019. Eyes Wide Open, Evolution, Singular Act 1, and Singular Act 2. All of these were released through Hollywood Records, the record label owned by the Disney Music Group. Because of this, Carpenter is actually declaring Short and Sweet to be her second release since gaining full artistic control when signing with Island. She stated, "It's my second big girl album. It's a companion to Emails I Can't Send, but it's not the same. When it comes to having full creative control and being a full-fledged adult, I would consider this a sophomore album." In addition to the 2 singles already mentioned, the album spawned a third single, Taste, which dropped along with a music video on the day of the album release. I was happy to see that in addition to programmed beats, much of the album featured an array of instrumentation, and Carpenter wrote all of the songs herself with a fairly minimal team for pop music. With all songs seeing her collaborate with Amy Allen, with Julia Michaels and John Ryan appearing on about half of the record, and additional contributions to Ian Kilpatrick and Jack Antonoff. Many of these songwriters doubled as instrumentalists, performing guitars, drums, bass, keys, synths, and programming, with additional musicians brought in to perform the flute, violin, upright bass, additional strings, backing vocals, and slide guitar. This is what initially pulled me into the record and remains a strong element on the album. Before we look specifically at what makes Short and Sweet a special record, let's dig into the genre of pop music to provide a greater sense of context. Pop music is the very essence of popular music. Popular music is any music that is made within the expectations of the mainstream. Not necessarily made to sell, but has the potential for most people to enjoy. This includes pop music, naturally, but also most rock bands, R&B, country, and some hip-hop all fit into this umbrella. And the further you go to the extremes within any of these genres, the further you stray from the popular music umbrella. All pop music is popular music, but not all popular music is pop. Now we can look at rap music from the 80s compared to the 90s, 2000s, and present and see clear distinctions. This is by no means a stagnant genre. It shifts with the times, but hip-hop is hip-hop, rock is rock, country is country. Despite the vast differences between, say, Jimi Hendrix and Nirvana, we can easily put these two artists within the same box. Pop music, on the other hand, is almost unrecognizable decade to decade. This happens for a number of reasons. The first is the crossover hit, something so big within its own genre that it expands into the pop side of popular music. A fantastic example of this would be the Beatles. Before they were rock stars, they were pop stars. Simply put, they were just so immensely popular that they steered the course of pop music. Another reason that pop music often shifts is that it is often an early adapter of new technologies. Looking at the 80s, we could see most pop artists adopted the use of drum machines and synth-heavy tones far before most other genres. Michael Jackson is an excellent example of both of these. Given his roots with the Jackson 5 and Motown, Jackson himself really was an R&B singer. However, like the Beatles, he proved to be massively popular while also creating arrangements that made use of synthesizers and electronically programmed beats. Such a combination, a collision between popularity and technology, may have made him the king of pop, but again, pop always changes. And comparing Thriller to some of the biggest pop albums of the past decade, anything from Taylor Swift to Adele to Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, and these records would feel like they are entire worlds apart. This happens by large simply because pop music, like a shark, must remain in constant motion. It is largely the sound of youth culture, and while it is far more than just that, pop trends will always follow that of the youth. With such, it seems that the genre can feel simultaneously timeless as it is dated, and is perhaps more susceptible to the latter than most other genres. I think we are often quick to deride pop music. I'm guilty of it, and I'm sure that most people who do not primarily listen to it are equally guilty of such. By the very nature of this series, it doesn't come often that a pop artist delivers a record that catches me by such surprise, but that doesn't mean that pop music is by any means lesser than other genres. While the songs will be heavily polished and produced to be a safe option to provide for the public, the songs are heavily worked on by teams of incredible songwriters and producers and are performed by top-tier musicians. Some of these artists have the budgets to throw at every aspect of these songs, and while that alone doesn't make for a good song, it certainly helps. Pop music, after all, is defined by its hooks. You can almost measure the success of a song by its catchiness. Who doesn't love a great hook? The music industry, after all, is built upon hooks. I spent a lot of time this year revisiting Michael Jackson. There is no denying the greatness that was Jackson, but instead, I really honed in on the production. I wanted to listen to Michael Jackson for more than just that voice. I wanted to listen to the arrangements, the instrumentation, the structures, and how different elements would come and go throughout different passages. I was listening to Michael Jackson to hear the greatness of Quincy Jones, arguably one of the greatest producers ever. At times it almost felt like studying his work. We often admire pop music for its nature to be larger than life with massive hooks, stunning vocals, but underneath it is a myriad of subtleties that are equally as important. With this in mind, I started listening to more pop music and with this mindset, hearing songs like Espresso and Please, 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 I could hear the connection between Jones and Jackson in the arrangements, and this is precisely what appealed to me most, leading me to actually listen to Short and Sweet. By far and large, the album shines for its production. It shines for its attention to detail. It shines for its songwriting, and it shines for its use of dense, intricate, and subtle arrangements. Subtle shifts that you may not notice upon the first listen, but after a couple, you'll hear the differences between two verses and two choruses. It's a really interesting record for that. With that, let's actually look at Short and Sweet. The road to this record was seemingly simple and yet very successful. Coming off of a headlining tour in 2023 for the previous year's album, Emails I Can't Send, Carpenter opened for Taylor Swift's The Eras Tour, acting as direct support for her South American dates that year. And earlier this year, in Asia and Australia. Following this, Carpenter was set to perform at Coachella and was listed as the first artist on the third line of the poster. Big, but not huge. To make this more of an event, Espresso dropped a day before her set, and she was featured heavily on billboards throughout California, advertising that she was performing at Coachella. Billboards reading, "She's gonna make you come, ... to Coachella." But again, first name on the third line of the list. As the first single, Espresso was that of an artist finding their sound and certainly left the Coachella organizers wondering how she was only listed in that spot and not much closer to a headliner. 4 months later, the accompanying video has over 144 million views. The song itself is an absolute bop. It slaps. Set over a funky beat driven by rock-steady drums, a spacious bass line, and rhythmic chords on a guitar, you would assume the track was produced by Mark Ronson. There's just such a Valerie or Uptown Funk vibe to the track, so much so that I would love to see a Carpenter and Ronson collaboration in the future. The song is incredibly catchy. Carpenter has a way of delivering lines in a way that make them so hooky. A great example is the opening of the second verse, "I'm working late because I'm a singer." It's in the verse, it doesn't need to be a hook, and yet this line is absolutely central to the song. The pre-chorus has this sick lead guitar line that echoes the melody of the upcoming chorus, and as the song progresses, these elements all converge with more frequent lead vocal lines sung over the original melodies. It works so well and is one of the poppiest moments on the album. The music video sees Carpenter arrive at a beach resort via a boat, presumably not hers, but the male passenger who falls out of the boat following a sharp turn, which gets some laughs, but we also see Carpenter swipe his credit card as he falls out of the boat. There are a couple of dance numbers. It's well choreographed, it's luxurious, but the real twist comes at the end, where the original man from the boat returns with the police, resulting in Carpenter's arrest. Twist aside, it's a fairly regular pop video, but it's the conclusion that serves as a punchline to the opening of the video. It ties it all together from a small moment that you wouldn't think twice of at the beginning to something that concludes it all together nicely at the end. It comes full circle with a joke. It's something that's well thought out, and it makes the video stand out, separating Carpenter from the typical role of the pop diva. As we see, she refuses to take herself too seriously. After all, the joke is on her in Espresso. Please, Please, Please was released as single number 2 on June 6. This song is led by a distinctly 80s synth line, something which at first was the one thing about the song I did not like. But it's since grown on me. It's charming. It's got that sort of wobbly, almost cartoony-ness to it. It's distinctly that of the 1980s. Underneath is an acoustic guitar strumming along, something you can hear much better on the acoustic version, which was released in tandem with the single. A version in itself that features a prominent fiddle, hinting at a greater country influence, something we'll discuss shortly. From the densely layered and lush vocal harmonies to the use of hand claps and a thin electric guitar in the chorus, Please, Please, Please is yet another pop moment, and once again we see Carpenter's ability to deliver effortless lyrical hooks. As best heard in the chorus, the line, "I beg you, don't embarrass me, motherfucker." There is a lot going into that line. The delivery is flawless. The way it fits within the melodic and harmonic context of the chorus, filling out the second half of the passage, the way her voice shifts from head to chest voice for an absolutely bellowing motherfucker, to how the words just fit with a little extra space, not quite crammed, but just enough room to breathe, is perfect. The line really is a culmination of lyrics, musical context, and performance. And if evidence is needed, listen to the radio edit, again released within the single, to hear motherfucker replaced with little sucker. The words fill the space the exact same, but it's not the hook the song deserves. It falls dramatically short. And if you're hearing this song on the radio without listening to it further, you are doing yourself a disservice. Beyond this, and much more subtly, the second verse is nearly completely different from the first. With the exception of the drums, everything shifts. It feels like an entirely new section, entirely new passage. And most interestingly, the song ends on the bridge. You have the second chorus, and then we go into a bridge section which concludes the song. I love that. I love when any artist takes such a risk, because a bridge section is always, I would say, one of the hardest things to write. I believe it was Tom Petty that said bridges are hard because they have to be as good as the verse and the chorus. Otherwise, what are you really trying to say with this extra section, right? You go from A, B, A, B. If you're going to add that C section, it needs to be worth the listener's while. So coming up with a good bridge is hard, but like, I feel like putting the bridge at the end of the song, ending the song on this section is such a gamble. It's like going all in on a hand that you probably are confident in, but you're never truly 100%. It's such a risk. It's so cool whenever an artist in any style chooses to end a song with the bridge. It's something that's like rarely used for an ending. In any style, in any genre, let alone for a hit single for a pop record. Carpenter and her team stick the landing, and it's just such a fantastic moment on the album. Demonstrating further ambition, the music video follows Espresso, with it opening with Carpenter making bail, only to see actor Barry Cogan be arrested and walked into the station. It's implied that Carpenter then pays for his bail or waits for his release, and she picks him up after developing a relationship with him during visiting hours. There's a scene where she can be seen talking through the glass over the phone. She's wearing huge sunglasses and like a velvet headscarf. And there's just a major Tarantino vibe to the video, from the yellow font used within the title sequence, her outfits, particularly the sunglasses and the velvet scarf. It's very eclectic. It's very colorful. And given the slight action tone of the video, the high fashion really feels like 2000s Quentin Tarantino. Given that the song lyrically is about everyone seeing this man as being bad for her, and she's pleading him to prove them wrong, upon his release from jail, Cogan goes on a mob-fueled rampage and armed robbery, with Carpenter following along in hopes he'll change. She's incredibly expressionate, and the cinematography and edits only enhance this. There are scenes where she is singing along to the song with her back turned as he is beating up mobsters. She rolls her eyes at him as they close the trunk, and there's a body of someone still alive in the trunk of her car. She's just incredibly expressionate. And, you know, I think the greatest example of that is her eyes roll as he raises a gun at the bank teller. It's such an underreaction that it's comical. It's funny, and it lands. There's a gritty tone to it, but again, it still feels very tongue-in-cheek. And once again, the joke falls on Carpenter as she accompanies a criminal in hopes that he can change. The two videos back to back really are a strong cinematic visual statement for the album. Musically, both of these songs pull from a trend that has been attached to some of the biggest pop hits of the previous decade. The use of 80s funk, synth-heavy beats, light guitars, hand claps, and bass and drums is prominent and provides much of the supporting charm for Carpenter to soar over. I'd be remiss not to mention that not one but two of the three reviews I read for Short and Sweet cited an article by Dan Charnas. The article is titled "The Musical History Lesson Buried Beneath the Song of the Summer," and was written for Slate and was published on June 4th, 2024. The article looks at this style of post-disco or 80s funk, a genre that found a balance between the two styles. The relentlessly steady pulse, the use of synths, and rhythmic syncopation of disco alongside the melodic and harmonic sensibilities of 70s funk. Charnas goes on to explain that due to racial tensions and cultural segregation that continued to exist in the media, radio, and MTV, this genre never truly found the space to thrive and grow. So much so that it found so little space that it never received an actual name. He recounts how MTV was even hesitant to regularly air Michael Jackson's Billie Jean until it was too undeniable of a hit. And references how Prince managed to bypass this with 1999, a record that saw him embrace a greater rock influence, particularly through his use of the guitar and solos, in order to become more appealing as a crossover artist that could go beyond catering to funk and R&B audiences. As for this particular sound of the 80s funk, it found a home in 2010's pop, with artists like Anderson .Paak, Daft Punk, Bruno Mars, and others pulling influence from this lost era. If this is of any interest to you, I would greatly recommend checking out Charnas's article. It was a fascinating read about something that literally no one else is really talking about, and I myself learned a ton from it. It's a really cool read, and if you think about it, if you look back at funk, like, it never had dawned on me that 80s funk is so stylistically different but doesn't really have a name. Normally when we see shifts like that between decades, between styles, we give it a subgenre of some sort, and 80s funk really doesn't have that, which is something that I just never kind of put two and two together. It's a fantastic read. Regardless, it's such a style, such an 80s funk influence that is within the band supporting Carpenter on Please, Please, Please and Espresso. Without knowing what an interesting detail that was, that is exactly what drew me into these songs. You can hear it with the steady drums, the almost relentless pulse of the drums, the spacious, funky bass, the highly rhythmic guitars, the use of synths, and other electronic textures. It all kind of just works so well together, and it's also one of the reasons why they're able to add so many subtleties to the arrangements. It works so well in pop music, and it really works on these two songs by Carpenter. Most impressively, though, between these two singles, Carpenter became the first artist since the Beatles to have two songs debut within the top 3 of the Billboard Hot 100. Not the first artist to have a pair of songs occupy 2 of the top 3 spots after creeping up to the top, but debut, which is far more impressive. That means that within the week of its release, you racked up enough sales, streams, views, everything together. They have their own metrics for how they calculate streams and sales and whatever, but within that span of 1 week, you topped everything else these songs debuted and held on to those spots. Remember, Espresso comes out April 11th, with Please, Please, Please following less than 2 months later on June 6th. So Espresso had to debut in the top 3 and hold on to that spot until Please, Please, Please could debut also in the top 3, for the 2 songs to then appear simultaneously together. Furthermore, while she is the first artist since the Beatles to achieve this feat, the only other female artists to occupy the number 1 and 2 spots simultaneously, not debut, but occupy them, are Madonna in 1985 and Ariana Grande in 2019. However, neither songs from either of those artists had debuted in the top 2, which is what makes this record so much more special. Carpenter would hold on to this record for 6 consecutive weeks, truly making Espresso, or Please, 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 whichever you prefer, the song of the summer. The final single, Taste, dropped the same day as the album. Again, very poppy, although not quite following in the 80s funk styling of the previous 2 tracks, a bit more straightforward pop. The video is another great one, starring Carpenter and Jenna Ortega fighting over the same dude in a hyper-violent fashion. In one scene, Carpenter gets shot out a window only to be impaled on a fence. At a later point, she is strangled with her own severed arm. It's just super gory, super bloody, super violent. Again, just huge Tarantino vibes. We see Ortega dressed as a nurse with an eye patch, echoing Elle Driver from Kill Bill. Carpenter attempts to stab Ortega while in the shower with a knife, referencing Psycho. It's just a really cool video. It was probably a ton of fun to put together and to make, and it's just really cool to see how a song that's all about some dude going back to his ex and Carpenter saying that I was there and now he's with you, you'll still taste me. It's just kind of cool to add this very visual way of telling that story in a hyper exaggerated fashion. The music video itself it's a really good time, and yeah, I want to watch Kill Bill again. Quite interestingly, and a genius move on the marketing, the 3 singles are among the poppiest tracks on the album, with the exception of Good Graces, Bed Charm, and maybe Juno. Much of the remaining 6 songs, half of the record, while certainly pop influenced, lean hard into singer-songwriter and country territory. The singles were very clearly chosen for how they'd fare, pulling in a wider audience before taking the moment to demonstrate the versatility of Carpenter's songwriting. Short and Sweet is by far a much deeper album than you would expect, certainly more than I had expected. Short and Sweet is, of course, in reference to the 36 minutes, 12-song album that it is, but also to Carpenter herself, who makes an impression at 5 feet to be exact, as the opening line of the album goes. The overall tone of the record is very much centered around live musical instruments. There are guitars, keys, drums, and bass, all prominently working in conjunction with different electronic elements. And on the surface, Carpenter plays the role of the pinup girl. However, her lyrics contradict this common pop persona through a dry wit that is illuminated by a greater level of self-awareness. Something which further again dispels her from the archetype of the pop diva. We see this in her lyrics, how she juxtaposes herself, how she can be in one half of the line biting and scathing, and in the other half self-depreciating. We see this in the music videos. There is so much more at play to the persona that Carpenter is displaying currently with Short and Sweet. In addition to the singles, here are some of the standout tracks that make Short and Sweet a really cool record. The first, and maybe my favorite song of the album, Coincidence, is led largely by a crisp 12-string acoustic guitar. Coincidence feels equally influenced by the likes of Dolly Parton as it is Fleetwood Mac. The song opens with a verse before a brief pre-chorus that leads into a nearly instrumental passage accented by group chants, while following the harmonic progression of the verse. This leads you to believe that after the second verse and second pre-chorus, a chorus will finally arrive. But instead, it transitions into a bridge. To me, this song is without a chorus, which makes for a really interesting structure that leaves you longing at first for a chorus, until you realize that the song doesn't actually need one in order to stand out. Now you might say, but Jared, wouldn't that make the repeating pre-chorus the chorus by default? To which I would reply, this is a monologue. How did you get in this booth? But seriously, listen to those few phrases that follow the verse. This is clearly a pre-chorus. It doesn't sound like a chorus. It sounds like it's building to something, and then it doesn't actually amount to what it's building to, which is a really unique effect for the listener. Again, after first hearing it the first time, after the first pre-chorus, I expected the chorus to follow after the second pre-chorus. And when that didn't happen, I was just kind of like excited. It was a really unique way of building a song and kind of playing with expectations, playing with norms, and playing with just what you would come to expect from a pop record. The bridge itself is exceptional, one of the strongest on the album, and the country meets folk rock vibe of the song is very Laurel Canyon circa 1970, which I suppose also lends itself towards Joni Mitchell. Coincidence is one of the most interesting songs on Short and Sweet and a prime contender for demonstrating Carpenter's range as an artist. Everything from the vibe to the instrumentation to the structure I absolutely love. It's a really fantastic song. Dumb and Poetic is a melancholic track reflecting on a previous relationship and toxic masculinity and manipulation and just all the things that go along with that. I would go as far to say that the song itself may not actually be about a particular one person, but rather multiple men or, I guess, boys, if you listen to the chorus, that Carpenter has crossed paths with. Just because you talk like, act like, think like one doesn't make you a man, as she would say. The somber song features Carpenter and a single acoustic guitar, delivering a level of raw intimacy and emotional vulnerability that makes for a refreshing moment of pause among the collection of highly produced tracks. While occasionally aided by slowly swelling strings, Dumb and Poetic gives Carpenter a chance to flex her highly emotive vocals, while also spawning perhaps one of the album's most scathing lines. Try to come off like you're soft and well-spoken, jack off to lyrics by Leonard Cohen. The delivery is absolutely deadly and is bound to be an incredibly memorable lyric for the rest of her career. Like, it's when I first heard that line, I couldn't help but laugh, like, very loudly. It caught me off by guard. Who comes up with that? Jack off to lyrics by Leonard Cohen. The final track I would like to draw your attention to is Slim Pickens, a song that is very much rooted in a traditional country sound, so much so that you could hear Dolly fronting the arrangement of acoustic guitars, plucked bass, and the pitter-patter of brushes on a snare drum. Carpenter's voice is once again at odds with her lyrics for the star of the show, with an emotive melody that sees the singer longing for much more in a partner than what she has been able to find. With standout lines like the chorus refrain, "Since the good ones are deceased or taken, I'll just keep on moanin' and bitchin'." And this one from the second verse, "Jesus, what's a girl to do? This boy doesn't even know the difference between there, and they are, yet he's naked in my room." Much like Coincidence, Slim Pickens sees Carpenter continue to criticize modern dating culture with heart and a level of nuance. Musically, we see her further demonstrate her versatility as an artist in a meaningful way as she goes into a very traditional, very classic country tone, arguably more country than I would say anyone else who currently kind of blends country and pop together is doing. It was just totally, it caught me by surprise by how country it was, and not like modern pop country that has a twang to it, but is clearly someone singing over a program beat. Like, it was like country, and that really stood out to me. It was super interesting to hear that kind of come out of left field, if you will. Beyond these songs, there are additional moments of greatness on Short and Sweet. The way the pre-chorus of Sharpest Tool sees Carpenter begin each line with the last word from the previous line is subtle but very well developed and builds a level of intensity before dropping the energy in a very lo-fi kind of chorus, a very simple and basic chorus. The near Prince tone, particularly early Prince in the Revolution, of Juno especially that pre-chorus, post-chorus phrase with the crunching guitar and the super 80s tone, um, is just a really cool moment on a song all about unprotected sex, using the 2007 film of the same name almost as a verb. Uh, it's just clever, but like that one moment that leads into the chorus, leads out of the chorus, felt super early Prince and the Revolution. Um, Bedchem is another song. At first, I was kind of like, whatever, like skip it. But it's the more I listen to it, the more I realize that it is also a very 80s pop track, which is kind of cool to listen to. Their use of synths, the reverb on the guitar, the claves in the verse. It's just it's a cool moment. And the second track on the record, the overly poppy Good Graces, um, just a great standout song. And all of these stand out as noteworthy moments on the record. Furthermore, in keeping with the title, most songs consist simply of 2 verses and 2 choruses. The longest song, Juno, comes in at 3 minutes and 43 seconds. Many songs have a bridge section when needed, but most songs give you exactly what you want, leaving the listener actually wanting more, which, if you think about it, is the best problem to have. If your album is too short, if your song is too short, they can just listen to it again. It just means that they want to hear more from you. If you want to hear a third chorus in Espresso, just listen to it again. That being said, the songs are carefully crafted to ensure maximum replayability and catchiness. On a deeper level, however, the arrangements are densely packed, with nearly every song featuring a building energy, as one of the lead lines will reemerge in a chorus, as backing vocals are layered and as lead vocals swell and ad-lib atop of everything. It's across the album, it is a rarity for the second verse to instrumentally remain the same as the first. And if you think you've found one that does not change, just listen again. The production is top notch and, again, separates Short and Sweet from most pop records of the last decade. Quinn Moreland at Pitchfork credits Carpenter's credibility as a crossover singer, someone able to convincingly move from genre to genre in this manner due to her quote, big-ass voice. However, I would go one step further and say that said big-ass voice, as strong as it is greatly aided by a level of authenticity that Carpenter carries. Without knowing anything about her aside from the research done for this episode, like I said, I first discovered Carpenter with Espresso earlier this year. All 12 songs feel true to her experience. Her outlook appears genuine and brings a level of integrity to both her narratives and melodies. And this is just something that is often lacking in pop music. Whether she is taking a note from Aguilera or Dolly, Carpenter's performance displays an equal level of conviction. The lyrics are incredibly quotable, full of dry humor that is targeted at both past lovers and herself. Honestly, there were lines that had me laughing out loud on multiple occasions, but she comes across as naturally funny. She doesn't sound like she's trying to get a laugh, and that's probably why it works so well. Most importantly, however, is that Short and Sweet somehow feels very cohesive, even as a pop record that sees Carpenter overtly display singer-songwriter, alternative pop, and country alongside the slickly produced 80s funk of Espresso and Please, Please, Please. Rather than feel disjointed, Carpenter writes and sings like an artist who is both ascending pop stardom while also setting her sights beyond what we've come to expect from the genre. By all metrics, Short and Sweet is a true breakthrough album that feels like a turning point where the former Disney star is truly coming into her own, proving that Emails I Can't Send was not a simple one-off. In future, they will proudly refer to Short and Sweet as seminal. With total creative control, this album feels like a complete snapshot of Carpenter as an artist and where she currently is in her creative journey. In the grand scheme of pop, Short and Sweet stands as a unique breakthrough release. On one hand, Carpenter is unapologetically a pop star, while simultaneously her exploration of alternative influences demonstrates a desire for so much more. This record, I believe, will be among the biggest pop records of the year, if not the biggest pop record of 2024, and certainly will have the momentum to shift how we think about pop music and how pop music is made for the coming decade. Thank you for listening to episode 31 of Beats by Jer and the very first of this series, Left Field. Tune in 2 weeks for another episode. I'm Jared Harris, and this is Beats by Jer.